Hello and welcome to the April edition of Mytech U. Today we're actually doing we're having Michael Frasconi present core process development. Michael's our process improvement director. He's been with us for 2.5 years Michael, I think that's about right.
Yes.
And it's actually a presentation that he's also going to deliver at Tech Pulse next week on Tuesday, but I know not everyone can attend, so this is something we wanted to get out to everyone if they're not able to get to our Tech Pulse event next week. So I want to thank everyone for joining us and hand it over to Michael, who's going to lead us through core process development, some of the methodology that Michael's been trained on, is an expert in. He has his MBA, and he deploys here at Mytech. So Michael, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Nate. Can everybody hear me? I hope everybody can hear me okay. I just want to get... Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Nate. Thank you for the introduction. Today we're going to talk about core process development, and I'll be using examples of how we develop process at Mytech and show you some of the success we've had there. What I'd like to do is get into the, let me just go here, sorry. Hit my next screen. One of the things I wanted to bring up to begin with is traction. If any of you went to Tech Pulse last year, the implementation methodology we have for our leadership strategy all the way through the organization is Traction by Gino Wickman, who was our keynote speaker last year. And you'll notice the 6 key components of a business are on this screen, and my area, of course, is listed right there as process. So one of the ideas behind this is that through the implementation of Traction, we recognize that there are core processes that operate about 80% of our business. So even though I started 2.5 years ago, we set out on the journey to capture process and be very strategic about one process at a time and focus in certain areas of the business and move around. What Traction has allowed us to do is to be more focused in that area through our L10 meetings. I'm using a little bit of Traction language, but I recommend the book for any of you that haven't read it. This has helped give us some clear direction on how we manage process. So I'm just going to go into this, and the idea is to manage process. We have to kind of set the stage, and I want to provide this guide to everyone as a way to do it simply and to be able to see success in doing it in a one process at a time methodology, and I'm going to walk you through some of that, and at the end of the presentation I will actually give you a short demo with the tool we use, and that will serve as a benchmark, if you will, for any of you that choose to shop and look for your own software tools or any tools that you might be interested in. So let's just talk about what are the prerequisites for us to have a good core process strategy. The corporate strategy, as I mentioned, we have out there with Traction that drives the overall company. But what's our strategy for the actual process? How do we implement a process? And the other idea is, what are the requirements? What are the requirements of the organization? What do we need to make sure we get good process development and engagement? So if we address these 2 prerequisites, we are on our way to process development and engagement. And I'll use that term engagement through the presentation because I have a firm belief that you do not make process for people to follow, you make process for people to be engaged in. So let's talk about strategizing the plan. You really want to identify a process. I think what happens, and in my experience, far too often companies want to solve everything at once. And if you're going to take this journey, you want to take it one at a time, and you will find you will be much better off. And there's also, you have to understand, is why are we doing this process? Are we creating efficiencies? Are we resolving issues? Or we just want to measure our throughput so we understand the process. Any one or combination of these will be reason enough for you to explain to your users or your staff or your roles who are engaged. This is why we are doing the process. It's always good to give a reason. So let's talk a little bit about requirements. This is the big one. One of the things I have been blessed with at Mytech is I have full management support from the CEO all the way through the organization. That is critical. So if you, any of you are going to go on this process journey, you will want to be all in. That is very critical. The other piece is someone needs to manage and own the process or processes. And in my case, as Nathan said, I am the process improvement director. I own everything about process and driving it and managing change to the process. If you don't have someone in that seat and owns it with a passion, you will struggle. That is just a critical piece of information. The other piece is...
Let me interject before you go on to the next one. I want to hit on that bullet point really quick because I'll tell you, and this is from someone who as we've grown the business over the years and just worked to improve how we operate over the years, process is one of those things, and getting it, and it's not just about like having a whiteboard of a process or having a PDF of a process or a Word document of a process. It's also the documentation that goes along with it and the associated stuff, and it's one of those things that until Michael came on board, it was always, I wanted to do it. I'm like, gosh, I really should document that. I really should sit down and go through and identify that process. I should, but because that wasn't my primary responsibility in the organization, it was always a back burner issue. It was just something I rarely ever got to. And having someone, and that bullet saying having someone that's dedicated to it and that's really what they own and their job is to collaborate with everyone and that they're responsible for it, it's changed our world in the last 2.5 years. It's been incredible. So I know that a lot of the people who are either listening or watch this at a later date, they get process and they want process and they understand the need for documentation, but it always ends up being the last thing on their plate to do. And so in the end, it just doesn't get done, or it doesn't get done at the speed at which you'd like it to. So that's been the impact that it's had to our organization from my perspective. So just wanted to share that as well, Michael, because that's a great point.
Thank you. I love that kind of feedback. So yes, and the other thing is this individual, like myself, really needs to have some passion for it, and I think it'll be clear that I do. The third requirement we have here are the tools. There's a lot of different ways we can document process, as Nate mentioned. There's a lot of different available tools out there that we can use for documentation and output. But I think it's critical that we agree on what those are, and I'm going to share with you what we use, because you need a tool to capture and document. You need a tool that will be able to deploy the documentation to an area where people can easily find it and engage with it. And you also need tools to manage change. So we use a few different things. We have the software tool that I will demonstrate at the end of the presentation. Through that software tool, we have the ability to deploy. Now, deployment, if you don't have the fancy software tool, you will just need to know where is it going to live, where am I going to put it, and how am I going to manage change, basically versioning control. So those are three key things that you need to understand about your tools. And if you have those tools, terrific. And hopefully at the end of the presentation, when I provide you this short demo, it will also give you a benchmark to go out and look around for something. If you want to use ours, that's fine. I can help you, and we can schedule that for a later date. But let's talk about the development engagement. If we've met our prerequisites and we have somebody in place to own the role of process engager or process coordinator or process director, whatever you want to call it. But we want to just start out with some fundamentals. We want to keep it simple. The more you can add complexity as you revise and as you visit, but I think you have to think about starting at a high level, and you're really not trying to solve every single problem out of the gate. And I mentioned that earlier. That is really a very quick spiral you will get into, and it will end up going nowhere. One of the things we do is we start by modeling as is, but naturally some improvements are made. So if you're whiteboarding to begin with, and then you have your process owner go and document, or maybe document as you go, we can do it either way, and I'll explain that later. But you start by modeling it as is, and when you have the right people in the room, and I'll talk about those discoveries, you're going to naturally make some improvements, but don't try to solve all of them. Table some of them for second review. You want to first get to agreement at a high level, and then you go back and work on some of the details. And that will be also managed through your change management and just second and third reviews of soliciting and getting feedback. So if you have that loop, and that speaks to the whole change management side of it. So here's really how I've broken it down. My background I have a lot of background in Six Sigma, Sarbanes-Oxley, ISO, and ITIL. So having a lot of experience in education, that has kind of driven me to develop for our small business. When I came on board, there was no framework for it, as Nathan said. It was just always on the back burner for people. So I've brought along my implementation methodology around process modeling so that people could understand it and keep it simple. So I've broken it down. If any of you are familiar with Six Sigma, they have DMAIC, D-M-A-I-C, which is define, measure, improve, analyze, and control. All of those functions are actually captured within these this simple cycle. And this is the way I see process. You discover what's going on, you document that, and then you work on the compliance piece through auditing and feedback and understanding where any issues that come up, and then you feed that into continuous improvement, which then feeds back to discovery workshops. So let me talk a little bit about some of those things. This is a guide that I've created, and I will be mailing these to all of you along with the PowerPoint presentation. So the discovery phase, as you can see, I've done a simple process map left to right with, you know, a ready for deployment condition. But what the discovery phase is really, that's quite simply, whether it's one person or multiple people, its discoveries can come in all shapes and sizes. If you are working on a process that encompasses many departments, you're going to want to have representation in that discovery. Now, I know in a small business world, getting everybody in the room at the same time is difficult because we all wear a lot of different hats. So it's the process driver, it's the person like me in your organization that would go around and gather the information, discover what is going on, like what are we trying to do. It could be a simple, and I always recommend, if you have not done this before, find a process that's fairly simple so you can get the rhythm of this first. Once you have this rhythm down, all process modeling becomes much easier. But practice on something simple and do it in a finite period of time. So if you have, say, a sales order entry process, which I can demonstrate at the end of the presentation, or if you have a shipping process or a finance process, but keep it contained to understand this process, and it really will help you establish that foundational level. So when you get done gathering all the information, your process driver will use the tools that you have to document and then deploy that documentation. So the document of this has to be something visual, understandable, and have enough detail so that a user or a staff member can actually understand. It's always good in the process flow to have any available content where you might have checklists, show the approvals, as this kind of does right here. When all are in agreement, you ensure the process is easily available to everyone. So once it's out there and you say, this process has been deployed, and I'll show you some of that, what it looks like for us, then you start measuring those results. You start auditing the process. And I will tell you, in this compliance phase, I have had great fun solving problems. I think that is one of the key components of my job. Once I have established really intimate knowledge of process, I tend to be a go-to person in the organization to find out where it goes wrong. When I find out something goes wrong or something gets missed, it becomes a change management request for me to manage. And I'll share a little bit about that further on. And that's really...
Let me interject on that point there too, because I can tell you that if, you know, one of the things that as your organization changes and grows, and as maybe someone in a leadership role who might be part of the initial discovery phase with, you know, working with the process, but I put myself in this category. I've learned this over the last several years, that I'm further away from the day-to-day transactional details that happen inside of the organization. And because of that, oftentimes, until you get down into this compliance phase that Michael's talking about, which is we start actually putting it into effect and we start making sure people are trained on it and they're executing on it consistently, when you get down to that level, boy, do a ton of little details come up, right? And you start seeing, well, gosh, this doesn't work that way. Well, what about this exception? And how does this work? And how does this tool doesn't do exactly what we thought it did, or an update to this tool broke the process as we had it previously defined. So it's really beneficial, and I love it that Michael engages with everyone in the organization whose role is defined in the process to execute the certain pieces, because it puts a lot of reality around the challenges that we face as an organization, and it also really empowers our team to, as Michael said, engage. So our team knows, hey, if you run into a roadblock or some weird issue with process, you have an avenue to report this, and you have a person who's going to be the champion to make sure that this gets resolved and fixed and improved. So that is one of the things that I've really loved seeing, how this isn't just even though the leaders are involved in the sponsorship and the initial kind of discovery and overall goals and objectives, it really then engages our entire team to say, how is this process giving me a roadblock, or how is this process helping me, or I can have an impact into making it through the compliance phase in particular to have a real positive impact on the job that I do every day. So anyway, sorry for interjecting, Michael, but that's something that I've seen that's been phenomenal.
I appreciate that. I wish you were at my Tech Pulse presentation. That'll come in handy. That's great. Thank you, Nate. So yeah, so as he said, you know, the compliance phase, it really is about engaging at every level, auditing what everyone's doing, and getting that feedback in the continuous improvement phase. And what needs to occur in that fourth phase, when we are in continuous improvement, by that I mean when a process has been developed, it's never finished, it's always in continuous improvement. And what you need in that phase is a mechanism for a feedback loop. Now, it could be an email address called process@your-company, and you could have your owner own that. I think there's a lot of ways we can do that. Being that Mytech is a service organization, we run our customers raise service tickets, so I actually have my own service board, and my process@mytech email that anybody wants to send to will raise a ticket for me, which is the impetus for process change. When I get a ticket on my board, I need to start having discussions, and I leave that open until we come to a conclusion. The feedback can come from customers too, right? Because what we do is, you know, customer facing. So we're going to always be looking for feedback and customer surveys and everything we can find to keep tweaking this process until it is a well-oiled machine. At the beginning, the first layer, it's going to be good, but it's going to be great as you implement continuous improvement. You should always have guidelines about, you know, your continuous improvement, because a lot of people have reasons why they want to do things, but you have to hold accountability to the corporate value structure, and I think that has helped us in a great way. We have a specific culture and values that we adhere to, and I think when we make decisions in our company, across the board, we have done a pretty good job on that, on making sure people say, well, is this meeting our vision? Is this meeting our, are we contradicting any of our corporate values? And I think that does help drive some of our discussion and decision making around process. So I'll show you how this works now in going forward. So let's go back to that phase one in the discovery workshops. Really what you're trying to figure out, and this slide is meant for your process driver. This is the guide. This is piece one. So when the process driver begins his or her discovery workshops, they really just want to know how employees are doing their part of the process, or how they're doing their job. In traction, they call it the way, the Mytech way, for example. But I look at process as that. You know, how are we processing? We need to ask some simple questions. What are the bottlenecks they are experiencing? And this is specific to the user, because what it provides is insight and some perception, because sometimes the bottlenecks are perceived and they may not exist, or they may just be a problem that's easily solved, or something we have to measure and work around. But we want to know what causes the frustration for you today, what works well. We want to capture everything. And the real important piece, because I look at process as a relay race, what is the current handoff to the next person or department? What is it that you do? What are all the steps you do so that you hand it off, right? And of course, listen and take lots of notes. I think a listening skill is something you develop and get better and better at over time, but as the more you're engaged with it, the easier it gets, because you know what you're listening for. But I think out of the gate, just listen, take everything down, get it ready. Let's talk about the documentation, and I'm going to demonstrate how we do that. But you just need a good process capture tool. I think out of the gate, you just want to make sure it's easy to use and it can produce different types of documentation. You need documentation that you can possibly print out if you need guides and checklists, which I'll show you. You need documentation that you could either put on a SharePoint site or print it out and manage the versions. I will tell you that I have very few documents that I print out, but I manage every single version that's on there, and I sign them out, and I know who has them in hand, so that when I make a version control change, I know who to go and replace that with. This is about designating where the accessibility to the process is. Again, I'll show you our SharePoint site, but again, it could be a simple shared drive that you have that's called process, and it's a list. There's a lot of ways we can get people off and running without having to invest a great deal of money, but what we invest in is our software tool, which I will be demonstrating, is Exol. Now, that is just one of many tools out there. It is just my preference of process management. This is one of the output screens. Go ahead, Nate.
Michael, yeah, one thing I just, you know, it's something as simple as, and we actually use our we call it a document repository. It's things, even things that are, you know, it's a way to, and I'm sure that we've all experienced it. I know we have. If you haven't, I consider yourself fortunate. But you know, as your organization changes or grows, or like, you know, you get shared files or documents that maybe someone emailed it out, or maybe it sits on this drive or that drive, or somebody saved it on their C drive, and trying to control what is the authoritative version of this document. You know, what is the, you know, whether edits have been made or not. So this is one of the ways we've even gone, not just around process, but around also having this be the authoritative place where people can know to go to find the most recent current version of that document as things change over time. So it's been great relative to the number 2 there, is designating a place where people can know to go. And we, as we build this library and continually, add documents and improve the process, it keeps reinforcing our team going to this place and using it as an authoritative source. So we're not done yet by any means, but it's been a big step in the right direction of getting our team used to, kind of going to this source. So.
And if time permitting, I do plan to show a little bit of that, Nate, and I will pull up the process site as part of this webinar, just so people can get a flavor of that. Okay, so this is a high level, I use this as a way to define process, and this is how the tool looks, but you can use swim lanes with our process. You can actually set up high level handoffs and approvals, and the fork can, the output can show that as you see here, there's 2 different things can be done at the same time. It's a good visual representation, and if you'll notice over here, I've got these 2 little arrows because you can then in our tool even drill down further and provide task information, because maybe at a high level, yeah, maybe it's I have to enter some data or I have to listen to some information, but usually there's 1 or more things that have to be done within a stage of work, and the stage is just a term I use within this software. But I just want to, this is a really good visual on how process should be developed from a visual standpoint, because if you look at something like this, it's very clear what needs to be done, and I think that you'll see as we go forward. This is just an example of one of our recent processes that we have just officialized, and it's going very, very well for us, and it's our service delivery process. But what we've done for training is in each of the roles of the service delivery process and the phases of managing a ticket, we have defined some real specific guidelines within the tool, and I've printed them out, and I know people laugh, but I laminate them and give them to the managers, and if you see the little fine print on the bottom down here, those are actually versioning control numbers so that we know we're at the right version. But it really has helped our staff train our remote support folks, and they are absolutely loving the new process, and we have seen tremendous results. This is just a snapshot of where we store our processes, and when I will bring up that actual site and show you where the document repository is below. But again, this is just a simple, it's just on SharePoint, and what I have is a little language at the top about why it's in alignment with our EOS, which is from the book Traction. And I also have a clarifying statement that we always use. It's one of our mantras. When a process, if you get stuck, always humanize the process. You have to deliver that message so people don't sit on things. You always want to push things forward, and if there's an issue, take care of the customer first and then come see me about changing the request. One of the things I've developed in this section, which I can show you further when I open up the site, is my feedback mechanism, and all it is are email templates with the title of the process and some pre-canned information saying what's the nature of your issue. Send it in and I take it from there. It opens up a ticket on my board just like I was managing service, and I have to respond. It is my job to do that. But again, you can see we have it itemized out by Mytech's core processes, and when you're processing and you're getting really far down the road, you're going to find that you also have a lot of additional or ancillary processes that also need to be done, but maybe not be so core to the business, but they're very important and we do need them. So it's just a way to stay focused on the 80% of the business and also all the outerlying processes as well. I use FAQs to just kind of give people a little bit more help when they need it. Just how do I do this or how do I do that? So I'm constantly looking for ways to even update the site, and this thing has transformed and changed over time, and I'm sure it's going to change again. Here is an example.
Can you go back to that last screen really quick, please?
Sure. Yes.
Just to share with everyone, Michael brought up Traction at the beginning of the presentation, and one of the modifications that Michael has made to this site and this page is trying to identify that again, the core process, as you see here, versus the ancillary processes. That's actually where we, Traction really believes that 20% of your process is just the 80-20 rule, right? There's 20% of your processes really dictate 80% of your business. So the idea is focus, identify what those core processes are, and really focus on those. And that's really where you should, obviously that's where you should spend most of your effort and call those out and make sure that those are trained the most effectively. And then, of course, you're going to have ancillary processes, but you also can get pretty crazy on documenting everything down to the nth degree. but at some point there's diminishing returns, right? So at least calling this out and trying to also, this helps get our staff into alignment. This is actually a change we made in the last quarter as we're working to do a better job of communicating with our team on here are our core processes. So it's not just the leadership team or Michael who is intimately familiar with all these details, but it's also the rest of our team understanding really what drives and really what makes us deliver service and be productive for our customers. So that's one of the things that, and so this is kind of a change that was made specifically because of our engagement with Traction. So I call that out.
Yes, thank you, Nate, for that clarification. Okay, to continue, this is just one of the outputs. If you were to drill down on one of those links, this is our new hire onboarding process at the first two phases prior to start date and start date. You can see quite simply what we do from the interview process. This is just high level. Again, remember when you drill down, there are multiple tasks. One or more tasks within each of these stages of work, but the interesting thing is you have the ability, again, prior to start date, first day of employment, what are all the things that have to occur? When you drill down into, say, one of those stages, I'm just showing here with our HR staff person is then pinged. We use workflows in our system, or we just can do manual things as well. You can define it, and as long as you define it and people can go here and understand what they need to do, it's been working very consistently. We have a welcome packet that we provide for all new hires that contains all their forms and additional things about the company. And there's also some service tickets that need to be raised to get them set up properly in our system. And this has been working quite consistently and very, very well. Just to show you again, you want to provide these guides, checklist, and the visibility. This here, of course, is the visibility. Let's get into that third and fourth phase of compliance and continuous improvement. Again, I'm the process owner, so I'm responsible to audit and review process, but that doesn't mean every role doesn't have responsibility to engage. When I train users on process, I have them sign an engagement form. I think people tend to adhere to the engagement and to the and work to engage with the process and engage with me and their peers if they have signed off on something. Soliciting feedback is constant. I spend a lot of time just checking in with people. How's it going? What are you doing? Because sometimes people just forget to submit an email. I have to actively go out there and look for feedback to make sure we're all doing things well. And then, of course, you need to manage the version control, which I talked about before. And this whole thing really relies on the accountability. Everyone's accountable at this point. When we have all agreed we're going to manage a process a certain way and we are going to engage for change management, we all become accountable to that process. And I think that actually is what is holding these consistencies together and why we are seeing the results we are. Everybody has the understanding, and that also comes through that support I talked about at the beginning from management. Management is said, this is how we're going to do it, and everyone's accountable. It has been tremendously, tremendously successful. And again, back to making it easily accessible and this thing here. As the process owner, the faster, if I can stay ahead of the game, or right behind the game, if you will, every time a process change comes in, I want to be very responsive, I want to be on top of it, and I want to make sure that if the change is warranted, that we make that change and it gets out there right away. My whole idea of compliance, and this speaks to ISO very much, on when you say you're going to do something and you have it written down, you really should be doing it. So that compliance is really important. So making those changes quickly does another thing. It develops trust from the staff that these things are good and that the documentation really does show what they're doing. So now let me get into my demo. I want to share with you the tool we use because I think that will give you a benchmark. The nice thing about this tool, and I think this will help you probably formulate some questions if you're going to go out and shop for one, is that you really don't need to have an IT technical expertise person. While I work for Mytech, I am not an IT, I do not do technical work. I am more of a business analyst in this respect, so there's no need for me to be technical to use this tool. It's a business analyst tool. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you, like, for this purpose, if we select a process, it is comprised of these three basic components: stages of work, roles assigned to those stages, and then again, as I said before, one or more tasks in those stages. Okay? While you're developing that, while you're benchmarking, these are some questions I formulated for you to go and ask other providers. Is the software easy to learn? What's the training time to learn how to use this software? This software, I have sold it a few times just as an ancillary thing to what I really do, but it's a one-day training Generally, 2 days if you really want to have practice, but it's very, very easy to train up on. And are the tasks reusable? When you start creating objects in this, can you just copy and paste them? Those are simple things that some process software will not do. And different output options. As I stated before, we have HTML, we have Word. You can also export this into Excel to just have a list of the roles and all the processes they're involved in. So there's a multiple way for these output. You know, how many ways can you filter by roles or groups? Can you do it in HTML, Word, or Excel? Does it have customizable notes and customizable icons? Because again, visibility, the visual ease of the process is important. So if you can use customizable icons to represent applications that you use, or websites, or shared drives, or certain types of documentation, can it aggregate data? I don't think the aggregate data is as important in the very beginning when you first go through these first rounds, but you want to be able to grow into this software, and we are still not even using all of the functionality of this software at 2.5 years, but what we have used has worked very, very well. So I'm just going to back out of my presentation for a minute, and I'm going to jump over to, I have to open up a remote desktop, it closed on me, to actually where my process is. There we go. Give me 1 sec. The process tool is on I'm away from the office right now, that's why I'm doing it this way. So Nathan, can you see this screen?
Yep, it came up just fine.
Perfect. Okay. So when you buy this software, it's going to come out of the box looking just like this. One of the things that I added before starting to develop a process is you have the ability to customize notes. Remember when I said, can it aggregate data? Can it do different things? You have the ability to enter any type of note. I tend to just do this one for starters. Sometimes I add description, sometimes I add instructions. You can tell by looking at this, it's very Microsoft in nature, where you have the left panel with all the different things between processes, roles, and tasks, and you have the model settings where you can create all kinds of defaults that will automatically occur as you develop. But let's just kind of put that aside and leave that for training, and I just want to demonstrate a simple process setup so you can see the ease of how the process development can look, and then how the output can look as a result. And it will take just a few short minutes to get that going. So when you have your model ready to go and you want to create a new process, you know these two things are the most important. Who is in the room? Who do I need to talk to? So let's just say I'm going to create a process, and I'm going to add a new process called sales order entry or sales order management. Most of you, I think, could relate to that. If you sell a product, any kind of productized goods, sales order management, a customer will request, and then you have to go with that request and make certain things happen. So let's just do that as an example. And I'm going to also create a few roles. This software, again, will let you create roles on the fly, but I mean, if you already know who's currently doing it, it's always good just to kind of get that started in the beginning. So if I'm talking about sales order entry, I'm talking about a CSR or a customer service rep, and you can see I can just hit enter and continue down the roles list here, because I think the first thing I do is make a laundry list, if you will. I'm going to continue to add more roles. That one just skipped ahead too fast. So we've got a CSR, perhaps. Maybe we have finance manager involved or a finance person to do company setups if they're not set up. Maybe we have a manager in there, but I don't think it's necessary for purposes of today. I'm just going to go, we have a purchasing person, a purchasing role that does the purchasing and receiving of goods, and then maybe we have a warehouse shipping role. We'll just call that warehouse or something like that. You can change them as you go. If you need to change them, it's really easy. I can double click very slowly and then change the name there, or I can also hit a properties editor. This is the functional piece of where you actually can customize and design everything about anything in your process. And you can see here in my property sheet I have that instructions. So I might even have in here, I could go back and say role description is one of the notes and add that and go, I'm going to add a word note and say role description, which is one of the ones we have just added because we're now getting very good at our role descriptions. But maybe I want to go in there for warehouse and just put in a role description and say responsible for all shipping, something like that, right? So I'm having the ability to get any kind of detail I want in here. I can also put in screenshots and what have you. This is really basically a Microsoft Word editor, and I'm going to have to move this over. Bear with me 1 second because I'm on a remote server. I have to go over here and hit my OK button. I'll just back out of there. Sorry, my bad. There we go. My apologies. Okay, so I can put some notes in there, and I'll keep going. And now you can see it says it has notes. Notice over here I have a little note icon. It's very visually easy to follow, and I think these are just things you can use in your benchmark. Let's just go on back to the process itself and add those, make sure we've got the roles in there. So I've got my roles, I have to find my process. The interesting thing about this tool is I can develop process in a visual way or do, as I said, the laundry list. So I'm going to open this up, and you can see I have a gridded page, and I have a top ribbon here where I can add stages, and I can add decisions and forks and all those kind of things. I can also begin, so in process discovery, most of the time I first want to get my laundry list. The nice thing about this tool is I can develop the laundry list, and it will also populate the visual side, the gridded page. So let's just go down the list, and I'm just going to throw some stuff in here and say my process is going to need certain stages of work, right? Sales order entry, maybe there's a customer request that comes in, and I'm just going to use this. Again, this allows me to just keep hitting enter and capturing the information. I might just be sitting in a conference room saying, okay, everyone, what's done in this process? And just start shouting out what it is, and people are going to say things like, we have to verify the customer is set up, right, in our system. We also have to make sure, let me just get that in there. Apologies. Maybe there's a setup of customer if they're not. Maybe there's entering, then we enter the sales order in the system. Maybe there's sending the order confirmation. Maybe there's, then we've got the purchasing piece. Then there's the receiving piece. And then maybe we just ship to the customer. So I've just basically outlined the high level. These are the high level activities that we need to put together for the process. One of the things I think that is very unique about this tool that I enjoy is if you're looking at the screen, you notice everything is in red. Mostly everything there is in red. This software is business architecture. So as I develop this and close the loop on things, these things start to turn black. So when I'm done, everything's in black. I know I have created a sound process and it loops correctly. So once I've done this, I can either start making a task list of the tasks that are within each of those stages. I tend to now stop here and go into the flow page because this is where the visual side is a lot more, it's easier to capture and work with. So you have the ability just to drag and drop just like any Microsoft thing. And I'm going to start by putting in my start. Every process has to have a start and a stop. I can change those to look like a go and a stop sign, which is what we currently do, but I'm just going to use all the defaults right out of the gate. And I tell people to stick with the defaults until you have processed a couple times and then start to finesse it, if you will. But if you can get the process visually done and have it make sense, people will be better off for that, and you can always make it look prettier later. So I'm just going to begin with the first step. I'm just going to start process mapping it over. And because I'm not using my normal mouse, this could take a little bit of trickiness, but I'll get there. The next thing we want to do is verify the customers in the system. You can see how easy it is. I'm dragging and dropping. And there are tools that, let's say, whoops, hold that back up. There are tools in here, so like if this is up here and I want to make it come across better, I can actually go into this mode and make sure it all lines up properly. So I can go like that and align it across the board. So there's ways that you can use the tool to quickly design and get it right. But I won't worry too much about that now. I'm going to go ahead and say verify customer and system. Well, there's a condition that we're going to ask the question after that. Is customer set up? And some of these may be necessary, or they could be done at the task level as well. So if the customer is not set up, we're going to just ask the question. I can always resize just to make sure you can read all the language. I'm going to just go ahead to the question. If the customer is set up, we're going to go ahead and enter the sales order then. as the CSR, right? You notice I haven't applied any roles yet, but I can easily, the tool lets me just pull this up as existing roles. Usually it's the CSR, I can drag and drop, and I always show the role. Now you can see that the role is in parentheses under the stage. We know who owns that piece. The next one, again, the CSR is still going to do that. Could that be done in one simple stage? Perhaps, but I think it's fine for now. We're capturing the information. We can finesse it later. As long as we capture the details, it really doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to just close that out for a minute. So the CSR, if they enter the sales order, if it's not set up, they're going to want to go to finance perhaps, and in when they verify the customer, maybe the end of that stage, they send an email to finance saying, I need to have this customer set up. So finance is going to go ahead and set up the customer, and you can see I'm just kind of dragging that in there. I'm going to go finance, and there we go. I'm going to add a joint because I need to put the ability to move that up here, set up the customer, and we'll continue the flow. The whole objective here is to give you guys the ability to see what the output will look like after a 5-minute setup, right? Enter the sales order, then we maybe send an order confirmation. That could also be a task. Right now we have it as a stage, but maybe we will make it a task and remove it. Sending the order confirmation, again, that's going to be the CSR. This is really a CSR-owned process, it would appear. Purchasing is going to do purchasing. I might as well just add all these now. Shipping over here. And our purchasing person tends to do our receiving. Maybe that's a warehouse role for some of you. Can be changed at any time. That's a good thing. We tend to avoid naming the role and not the individual because that way people can put on different hats. I'm going to go here, sending the order confirmation. And after the order confirmation is done, I'm actually can put an interesting thing in here because the order confirmation, maybe it goes immediately, maybe it doesn't, maybe there's some things that have to occur. But let's throw a fork in and just say we can do 2 things at once. That's always a good thing to have visibility because that's where you can see efficiency in the process. So it's pretty easy just to kind of maneuver. I'm going to say the order confirmation must go out and purchasing must get the POs to the vendors. So I'm just going to say these 2 things could go together. Maybe they could, maybe they can't. But purchasing, we'll do that. We're going to go to receiving. I'm going to do, these both have to be finished. We have alls and any's, and that comes with the training of the software. It's just to visually understand that with this little icon, with the arrows like this, it's different from the any, meaning all of these things need to be done. Or if this could be an option, maybe only one of them has to be done. But in this case, we're saying all of them. So then when that's been done, the next thing that happens is we receive the goods from our vendors and then we ship to the customer. Maybe we're missing a few things, but you can all see just how quickly I've thrown this together at a high level. This first stage is where we all say, do we all agree? Is this really what we do? Okay, now let's start talking about some details because they're in red. There's no tasks underlying yet. I can also add some swim lanes if I prefer, and you've seen those in there. Oops, design. I can add them horizontally, or I can add them vertically. So if I add it vertically, I just hit swim lane. I can use my properties editor, and I can put some color to it and say this is day 1, day 2. It's very, very visually useful, which you have seen. I'm not going to try to get something in there right now, but what I want to show is some of those notes and information. So let's just say we have the customer in the system. I'm just going to make sure I have a screenshot, but I'm going to go in here and say,
Mike, we have only a couple minutes left, so
all right, then let me
one thing and then let's wrap it up.
Okay, then what I will do is produce the output. The tasks, I can show you when I open up our site what that looks like, but the deployment of this is really quite simple. Thank you for that reminder, Nate. I'm going to go ahead and produce documentation in HTML for, oops, cancel, go here. My apologies, this mouse, there we go, current process only. I can do it one at a time, and I'm going to do sales orders. Sale, doesn't matter. So it produces it right away, and this is what it will look like from a simple standpoint. I can also produce it with everything unfiltered. This is how I produce it for our team today, very visual, and then it has the tasks underneath. We didn't have a chance to do that today, but you can see how quite easy it is to get through and have it. And this is what we put on our site which looks like this. And again, you saw this picture earlier, but here is our sales order management process, which is quite complex. And you can see there are a lot of things that have to occur, and we provide screenshots of every step and every instruction on how to do that. So I think that's really the critical piece, is that you have the ability to do so. But in addition, I can still print this out in Word, and we'd be fine that way. I'm going to pull back to my PowerPoint for the last screen because it's my favorite quote. This one. If I can't picture it, I can't understand it. And I always refer back to that. And that, my friends, is exactly how we do core process development at Mytech. One process at a time. And I'm done.
Yeah, well, thank you, Michael. As you can, as Michael mentioned earlier, you want to have someone that's passionate about process, and Michael is a very high-energy, passionate person, and we're very fortunate to have him on our team. And you know, it really has helped gain alignment, even at the high level that Michael just showed in the demonstration. It provides clarity of where am I in the process, who gets what my output, right? So if I'm the CSR and I need to give something to purchasing, I know that procurement's the next step, or finance is the next step, or warehousing is the next step. It definitely helps. One of our values is set the next person up for success. And by having the roles defined in our processes, it also helps our team understand, oh, my job doesn't end. My job ends here, but then it needs to continue down this path, and it really enables us to just provide a lot of clarity to the team. So, and then it also provides the foundation just to make incremental improvements, right? So that's the other key, is that one, as Michael said, one process at a time. It's really about, you know, the roles, the tasks, and being able to have a process improvement methodology in place. That was, Michael, what was the first process we defined?
Well, I think we did two in tandem. The very first one I started on was S2P with you and Philip.
Right, but didn't we define our process to change our process? Was that one of the first ones we defined?
No, actually, I developed that as an ancillary while I was working on our first two processes, because I wanted to deliver that feedback loop. So before we deployed any process, I had that as well. So we deployed that in tandem.
Yeah, so that was the idea, is that we needed to make sure that once we launched something, we had to give our team the way to engage with it and understand how they could change it. So I want to thank everyone. We're a couple minutes over here. Thank you very much for joining us. We're also going to send some follow-up information out to everyone who attended. So thank you very much. And if you can make it to Tech Pulse next week, we'd love to have you. Just go to twincitiestechpulse.com and you can register, or you can send Michael or I an email, and we can get you registered as well. So thanks a lot, everyone, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you, Michael, very much.
Thank you.